Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm talking about the new Edgar Wright film, Last Night in Soho. I've always been a fan of Edgar Wright. I really like the film Scott Pilgrim versus the World, and I thoroughly enjoyed Baby Driver. I have a couple reservations about that movie, but for the most part, I enjoyed Baby Driver as well. He's also wrote a couple of movies. I think he co-wrote The Adventures of Tintin, the Peter Jackson movie, and things like that. So he's definitely been involved with a lot of films I've enjoyed over the years. And I remember when it was announced that his next film is going to be some type of a psychological thriller slash horror film. I was always kind of intrigued by that. So here we are at Last Night in Soho, which is a psychological thriller slash horror film. And what the film is about is a young girl getting a college opportunity in London since she's pursuing fashion design. So she goes over there, finds a place to stay. Unfortunately, she doesn't get along with her roommates very well when she gets over there. Her grandmother has warned her of all the things that are happening in London and all the kind of potential dangers she could run into with being over there. And so at first, it's kind of a bumpy start for her, but things kind of start to pick up when she goes to sleep for the night at a different place that she ends up renting at with this older lady that has this lot of rules at this apartment of sorts. And basically, when she goes to sleep at night, she basically becomes another person temporarily. And she's seeing the life of this young woman with blonde hair in the 60s that's landing all these opportunities. She's finding places to audition at with singing and dancing and performing late at night at nightclubs. And so this girl's really intrigued by this. It kind of inspires her fashion design opportunity in London when she's over there for college courses. Her dresses and the work that she's putting in her school is getting better as a result because she's so inspired by this person that she gets to kind of experience her life at in the nighttime when she goes to sleep in this room. And as the film progresses, there's a lot of things about this person that the fashion designer student learns about that gets her very scared. It makes her very scared for what could have potentially happened to her back in the day when she was getting all these opportunities with auditions and things like that. And so as the film progresses, we find out what exactly happened to this blonde-haired girl that this Thomasin McKenzie actress, the real actress in the movie, portrays as this lead character in the movie. Kind of the things that she discovers about this person. What are some things that she can do in present day that can impact and positively influence a better life or a better outcome for this person if there is such thing. What exactly happened to the people that were responsible for some of these bad actions that happened to this girl, and what exactly are they at in today's world? So all these things are happen over the course of the last night in Soho, and so ultimately there's this big mystery that has to be solved, and this young fashion design student has to figure out what the answers are to all these mysteries surrounding her. But overall, guys, I enjoyed Last Night in Soho. I thought it was a very good movie. There's a couple things in my negatives I'll bring up that don't make it a perfect film. I would still say Scott Pilgrim versus the World is probably still my favorite Edgar Wright films of the films he's worked on up to this point. But there's a lot of things to really admire about this movie. There's a lot of things I'm going to go over in my positives as well that really kind of reflect the good things about The Last Night in Soho. And if you're a Edgar Wright fan in any way, shape, or form, I think for the most part you're going to be pretty happy with this movie. Even if you're not too into psychological horror films, there's a lot of things that Edgar Wright brings to the table as a director that I think will get you more intrigued into this movie in particular as opposed to any other psychological horror film that might exist out in the world too. But for my positives of this movie, for the most part, this is a great mystery and thriller that happens here. There really is a lot of mystery to London that Edgar Wright brings to this movie. There's a lot of things with nightclubs and certain characters, and we really do kind of get invested in what exactly happened to this girl that the Thomasin McKenzie girl follows late at night. The girl that she follows in her dreams is played by Anya Taylor-Joy, by the way. So that's kind of how the film separates when you're watching the lead character and when you're kind of watching this girl from the 60s and kind of how her life played out and things like that. So for the most part, there is a great mystery and thriller here. There's a lot of things that happen to this girl in present day as well that definitely impact the way this mystery unraveled in the 60s and how that impacts her own life in the present day. And so it really is a great mystery slash thriller that we get to experience throughout this movie. I also thought the set design was very amazing here. They definitely, when they go back to the 60s, they definitely make it feel like that, from the old Thunderball James Bond posters to the lighting to how places are set up, where the men and the women are at the bars, and what the dresses look like, what people were looking for, how guys and how girls like pick up dates and go to shows and where they're at during the shows and things like that. All that stuff felt like we were kind of back in the 60s and looking at something that happened at a time that has long passed. And the set design that they hired, whoever Edgar Wright hired to do the set design in this movie was very, very good, whether it was the interior shots or the exterior shots. It really had an amazing sense of set design in this movie. And that goes into my next point. I thought the 70s film look that the film maintains. It has a kind of a 70s color palette as well, with the color tone and the color correcting. Just the way that the reds pop and the yellows pop. And they really kind of give you that 70s film grain look in certain scenes to really make it look like you're watching kind of something that would happen in the era of Halloween and Suspiria and other films of that era that were really big in the 70s that also kind of dealt with psychological horror like this. Um, so I do like the overall 70s film look that they go here and the overall color palette that the film chooses to use over the course of this movie. I also like the film's message of getting out of your shell. Early on in the film, you find that the Thomasin McKenzie girl character really kind of has a hard time making friends and fitting into the nightclub life and fitting into parties when she goes to them. And so the film really kind of makes the point that when she's watching this blonde-haired girl in her dreams, this kind of encourages her to get out of her shell a little bit, to kind of bring out the best of her abilities in her fashion design classes. So I like the film's overall message of getting out of your shell, kind of doing something that makes you uncomfortable at first, but you kind of get more rewarded as a result of kind of coming out of your shell and allowing people to get to know you better and things like that. So I like that overall message that the film pursues, because we do kind of are introduced to this really quiet young girl at the beginning of the movie and how she manages to get more out there and willing to kind of allow people to get to know her over the course of this movie and things like that. So the overall message of getting out of your shell in order to kind of get a more rewarding outcome out of something, I really think is definitely said here over the course of The Last Night in Soho. I also like kind of the intriguing and exclusivity, if I said that right, exclusivity of nightclubs here in this movie. They really kind of show you kind of some of the cooler things that some of the shows that they did back in the day and things like that, and how people's talents were used in kind of interesting ways and how that kind of attracted a crowd and attracted people to kind of spend their evenings at some of these places to kind of see what your talent was and things like that. So I liked how they showed the more intriguing sides of nightclubs here. They definitely show the downsides as well, don't get me wrong, but they also show kind of the more intriguing sides of those things over the course of this movie when it comes to the nightclub scenes. But for my negatives of The Last Night in Soho, I thought the third act of this film, unfortunately, was kind of sloppy, and unfortunately, there's a lot of reviews already submitted for this movie that kind of hint towards that as well, as far as what people had as problems for this movie. Yeah, I would say the third act in particular was kind of sloppy. I felt like there was a lot of things they were trying to do at once. They were just trying to kind of get everything off the table and get resolved. So I thought the third act, unfortunately, overall, without spoiling anything, was a little sloppy in this movie. There's also some things at the end of the movie that they try to quote-unquote explain, and they don't always make a lot of sense, unfortunately. I thought some of the aspects as far as what happened to some of these people and where exactly this blonde-haired girl ended up and things like that. Some of the parts that they explain with those sort of things I thought didn't make a lot of sense, unfortunately. And there's a lot of things, too, where while I was watching it, for every answer I was given, I had a question to the answer. So it was just one of those things where, yeah, it makes sense, I guess, for how things ended up the way they did and how this girl find out where things were at the present day. But at the same time, there is some qualities of the story where the more they explain it, just the more questions I have. So it's one of those things where it's counterintuitive. So for every answer you get about how things were happened or resolved, we have a new question that comes up. And sometimes some of those new questions don't get answered because those old questions are now getting answers, and unfortunately not the new ones. I also thought more time was needed with the overall job slash career slash college courses portion of this lead character of the story. I just felt there was more time needed with getting to know where she was at in school and things like that. We definitely get a lot of scenes where the things she's experiencing late at night in her dreams, specifically when things get bad with that blonde-haired girl, and how it negatively impacts her during the day and things like that. Um, I just thought more time felt needed with kind of learning about her and her desire for fashion design and what was going on in school and things like that. I feel like a lot of that gets pushed off to the side the more the film progresses. So as a result, I feel like I don't get to learn about this lead character as much as I'd like to. We just kind of see her experience with this tragic mystery and thriller part of the story that she's experiencing about this blonde-haired girl over the course of this film, and we really don't get to know her as personally as we probably would have liked to. But overall, I'm going to give The Last Night in Soho an 8.5 out of 10. I think it's a very good movie. Like I said, I think Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is still my favorite Edgar Wright film. So I would say whatever your favorite Edgar Wright film is going into this movie, it's probably still going to be your favorite. And Last Night in Soho could potentially be a good second or third favorite film from Edgar Wright for you. But for me personally, like I said, I really enjoyed this movie. I think it's a great, solid Edgar Wright movie. But unfortunately, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is still my favorite from him. So 8.5 out of 10 for me. I do recommend seeing Last Night in Soho. There is a lot of good things about it, but go into it knowing that it is a little sloppy in the third act. Some of the aspects of the story that do get explained are kind of make you ask more questions and get you more answers. And I thought more time was needed with the overall job slash career slash college portion of this girl's life to get to know her more as a lead character. So 8.5 out of 10 for me. I do recommend seeing Last Night in Soho, but like I said, go into this knowing that it's not perfect, and whatever your favorite Edgar Wright film is going into this movie is probably still going to be your favorite by the time the film is over with. But I highly recommend seeing this film, and it gets an 8.5 out of 10 for me.